Welcome to the first 8 cubes of 2026. I'm KMBest, he's Lamby series, and we have a bunch of cards to talk about for the new season of Marvel Snap, the dragon-themed season. We're going to start with Shou-Lao, who is a 5/8 with an on-reveal that for each turn you have played 2 or more cards, gives +3 power to the most recent character you played before Shou-Lao. There are a couple of good things that I want to point out about this card. The first is that it says character on it. It would have been very easy for them to jack this up and have it say card and then make the card a lot worse, because then it would simply be using a lot of spells that you could actually mess your own Shou-Lao up with. So I appreciate that they put the training wheels on for this. The second thing that I want to highlight about this card is there is currently a Merlin Werewolf deck that is extremely popular and plays a very medium 5-drop, that 5-drop being Annihilus. The biggest question for this card is going to be, are you going to be an upgrade in the Merlin Werewolf deck over the current Annihilus package?
Well, it will. It will be an upgrade, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so this card, also firstly, Happy New Year, everyone. But yeah, so this card will be something that I think it's gonna be really, really powerful in the Merlin Werewolf deck. It's like the boss monster to Athena deck, the boss monster to any deck that plays like multiple cards per turn. Because so it's a 5/8 that gives +3 if you play 2 or more cards on like a given turn before this, right? Like, but in my opinion, it's just gonna be like a +6, maybe even +9 very often, right? Because it's so easy to play multiple cards in one turn when you play like a Merlin Werewolf deck. Because Merlin generates you 1-cost spells very consistently, and then you just pair. You're already currently doing like 1+ Werewolf, 1+ X, 1+ something else, like already, you know. So this will fit in very naturally without you having to change anything in that deck. I mean, you change the bad 5-drop, right, to this, and then it makes it even more powerful, like Beast. Where firstly, 5/8 is a decent amount of stats on a 5-drop, like kind of standard. And then like you add a lot of power to like something else. So you're kind of splitting 2 bodies, right? You're playing a powerful card that splits the power to another card. It's like you allocate power to 2 different locations with 1 card. So I think that's actually one of the biggest like plus points of this card. Also on review, obviously, so it moves the werewolf, but that's a less important thing, but it allocates power to 2 different locations, and I think that's like a super powerful thing.
Right. To me, this is sort of Annihilus, but better in the context of those decks. But there is sort of a dynamic going on where, like, if you're looking at the 5-drops a werewolf deck is reasonably going to play, there's this, which has no package assigned to it. You can just play it, right? It just goes in the deck naturally. You don't need to, like, do other things to facilitate it. There's Annihilus, which comes with the inclusion of Sentry, except you don't ever really want to play Annihilus. You would just much rather play a Merlin Evolve on the Void. And then there is the Zombie Giant Man, which is the strongest points package, but also gets like one shot by Shadow King in multiple lanes, right? So like if you're playing a Zombie Giant Man deck, they just Shadow King your Zombie Horde. Your Zombie Giant Man does nothing. You've lost 2 lanes off that Shadow King instead of just 1 lane. So this card is sort of in the middle in terms of what it's asking for. It's not asking for a package of cards other than what you already play, but it's also not bringing anything else with it. And it is vulnerable to Shadow King in a way Annihilus is not, but it's not as vulnerable to Shadow King as Zombie Giant Man. So to me, it's very much in the middle of those 2 cards. I think it's probably less points than Zombie Giant Man, but it doesn't get like absolutely shenaniganed on by a Shadow King. A Shadow King is still good against it, but Zombie Giant Man is uniquely terrible into a Shadow King.
Yep.
And so this is a card that I think has a lot of room to succeed, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's even if it's definitely less points than Zombie Giant Man, I think it's actually a good thing. I mean, it's good enough that to still play even if it's less points, because splitting the power into 2 different locations, and you can kind of control where you want the power to go in the previous location, right? Where based on where you played that card. So I think it's actually super important. Also, a funny thing is, long ago when Annihilus and Sentry came into being, I had a deck titled because you just ran those 2 cards in your werewolf deck. I called it the Small Junk Package. And then now you can swap the small junk package for 1 single big dragon. And I just wanted to say that, but yeah. So
next up is Lockheed, a 2/1 with an end of turn ability. If you've played a 1-cost card this turn, Give something at Lockheed's location on your opponent's side of the board -2 power. That seems pretty good because on the one hand, it's like a very reasonable way to do a scalar. I think this is a card that can have a lot of upside. The downside of it, though, is that when you look at what this card is, it's another card where you look at it and you're like, oh, this is like a Werewolf Merlin card. I can do stuff with this. There's two things that I don't like about this card. The first is that for a Kitty Pryde card, I'm probably never playing this card with Kitty Pryde. Lockheed is explicitly Kitty Pryde's pet. The problem is there are a million ways to fulfill the function of Kitty Pryde that are better than Kitty Pryde at this point. Those ways being Merlin, Prowler, Kate Bishop. Those cards are all better than playing Kitty Pryde. They're going to give you cards that are better than playing Kitty Pryde, so you play those instead. That's what Lockheed's package looks like. So that just on a flavor basis, I don't like that. Thing about this card that I think might hold it back in terms of gameplay is that it's very capped. This is a card with a maximum output per game. It's not getting multiple procs. It gets one proc. You play a 1-drop, you get 2 extra power out of it. That's cool. That's a really awesome thing. But compare it to Werewolf, where every little 1-drop with an on reveal that you play gives that card 2 extra power. This one, just 1. It's capped. It's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with this card, but I don't see it tearing up the metagame.
This card really was just honestly designed to be played together with Kitty Pryde, sadly. Like if you look at the amount, the way, because you mentioned it, right? Like how often do you play many 1-drops in a game? Not so often in the current state of the meta anyway. Like the only time it's really very possible is because you have a 1-drop that keeps coming back to your hand, which is Kitty Pryde. But the thing is, Kitty Pryde is not exactly very good in the meta right now. So you kind of like to extract max value and power from this card, you kind of want to play Kitty Pryde, but you also don't want to play Kitty Pryde as a card right now, you know. So this card is very limited in what it can do. I mean, there's Thanos, but at the same time, no. I'm just thinking of ideas that like could make this make
it feels
sense,
like this
I
card
highly
is sort
doubt
of
so.
destined to be like the third best thing you can do in a werewolf deck. And it's like, well, I don't want to do that then. Like that's sort of where it's at, where it's like, I can be the world's worst werewolf by night. That's what this card is telling me. And it's like, all right, I would rather just play a good card. Hey, I'll be fine. Dragon of the Moon is perhaps, I would argue, the worst Season Pass Plus card I've ever seen. This is
Saves
a
you money.
3/2 with an ability that steals 1 power from even cost cards in all hands. I think it is deeply underpowered. And I think largely the dynamic I want to point out with this card is it's kind of got a Cassandra Nova thing going on without Cassandra Nova level upside. What I mean by that is a lot of the power of a 3 is that you can play it alongside other things late. This card gets worse the later you play it, which means that you're only ever going to want to play it on turn 3. If you play it on turn 4,
you get hit by Shadow King.
Right. You play it on turn 3, you get Shadow King, you feel stupid. Right? Like that's just sort of fundamentally what's going on with this card. Like you are going to play a 3/8, a 3/9. There's nothing wrong with playing a 3/8 or a 3/9 except if you have to play a master mold to give yourself a 3/8 or a 3/9. Like this is a card that I think is cool. It's nice. It's cute. There's cool things going on here. I think it is several points of power below where I would actually want to bother with it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have much to add on that one because sadly, okay, so I can say that the art is nice. That's what I want to say about it. But normally when I say stuff like that, it means that I have nothing better to say about the card. It's really one of those cards whereby, like we mentioned, right? You want to play it early, but when you play it early, you lose to the number 1 tech card in the entire game right now. You play it late, it might not even get to 3/6. That's the funny thing. So I really don't see a point of buying that premium season pass plus. Is that what it's called?
I honestly, like, the way they've named those things is so it's like, okay, I think it's a super premium season pass. I think that's what it's
So
called.
it's not premium plus, it's super
No, premium. Okay, incredibly, the base season pass is premium season pass.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And then this one is super premium. I don't think it's called Season Pass Plus. I think that's just what we call it.
Okay.
Dude, I just realized they're kind of named like gas.
What do you
Like
mean?
in
Or like premium
America,
gas?
when you get gas for your car, it's
Uh-huh.
like
Premium,
premium
super
and
premium.
super premium.
I feel
Like
like wait.
that's kind of just like how the names work in America. Like all of the season
Okay,
passes
okay.
are named like gas station prices. Last of the new cards of the first week is Majestic Wingbeat, a card that Lamby read and went, "Oh my god, isn't this super jacked up?" A
Yep.
1 cost spell that gives +2 power to the leftmost card in your hand, and if that card costs 5 or more, -1 cost to that card. Lamby, tell us why this card is so jacked up.
Okay, so the actual thing that I said when I read the card, which was okay, so he was correct. When I looked at the card, I read the text. I said this card is super something that I cannot say in the video.
Yep.
But anyway, so basically I do think this card is busted. It's just crazy strong. So firstly, leftmost card +2 power, not the best part, but sure buff. But if it's 5 cost or higher, give it -1 cost too. So basically, if this is your in a ramp deck, if you don't draw your Ebony Maw on turn 1, you play this on turn 1, and your deck's like all 5s or higher, you kinda like can even afford to miss your ramp because you get to play the 5 on 4, you get to play the 6 on 5. This card is insane, man. Like and like I think you guys already know that I'm a very big fan of all these like 1 cost enablers that they are printing right now. Like deafening chords like attack. This is like an enabler for like a ramp deck, or like honestly not even ramp, like any deck that's like plays a decent amount of like maybe 5s or 6s. I guess mostly ramp, but like any deck in the future that plays a decent amount of 5s and 6s can just benefit from this one. Of course, at the end of the day, the +2 will matter if your unit does duplicate as well. So any 5 or 6 that duplicates, heck, even if it's not a 5 or 6, even if it's like a random unit in your hand that duplicates or whatsoever, will get the buff like double, triple times, right? So for a 1 cost spell, I think this does a lot, and it's really, really flexible. You can kind of like, if you don't play perfect mana expenditure anyway every turn, you also can kind of just like not play this card on turn 1, just hold until like the card is like on your left, and then you just play it and then go from there.
I'll go out there and go a different direction here with this card, which I also think is good, but I think you're underestimating this card in decks that just want to play it for a buff. Like, I think there are going to be decks that aren't specifically like 5 and 6 drop heavy that are just like, I'm going to play this card because it's a targeted buff. I'm interested in doing that.
Okay.
There are currently decks in Marvel Snap that are doing like America Chavez stuff. I would always rather play this than America Chavez because this is not taking up a space on the board. Like, this is just like, if you're playing America Chavez, I take that card out, I put this card in. And that means, like, even outside of, like, oh, I'm going to deck build for Wingbeat, I kind of just think the card is good. I just think this card does things, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you're playing, like, a Shou-Lao werewolf deck. I wouldn't be surprised to see this card in here. Like, I
it's
think
like
it's
2
very
power
solid.
doesn't fill board space. Yeah, it's kind of insane. Just
like,
2
it's just
power
one of
doesn't
those
fill
things where
board
it's
space.
like, I can totally see this card just showing up places and being pretty fine when it does. I think this card is good.
Yeah, and sometimes making your Shaol cost 4, right? Stuff like that.
Yeah, like, I don't think this card is Deafening Chord level, but I think it's very hard for a card to be Deafening Chord level. I think Deafening Chord is sort of like the best a 1 cost skill is ever going to get. But it's a lot closer to Deafening Chord than it is to Web Sling. I'll tell you that much.
I love these 1 cost spells, man. I love it. Love it so much.
On to the review of Fantomex, who I think is, I have enjoyed playing this card. I think he's a little underpowered in a couple of ways that are worth pointing out. The first is, this is the second card of a specific type that I feel like they've taken a really light hand with. The other one that I want to compare it to is Warlock, because Fantomex and Warlock are both activate cards that sit on the board and need something else to happen for their activate to function, right? With Warlock, it needs you to also be a deck that skips energy. With Fantomex, you need the discard and the destroy. These cards, to me, are extremely safe places to put power. Maybe the safest places to, like, push. If you have a bunch of cards, all else held equal, you compare Fantomex to Aurora, I consider it a lot safer for the metagame to give Fantomex more stats than to give Aurora more stats. And I bring this up to say that I feel like they don't feel the same way. When they buffed Warlock, it was like, we're going to make it a 3-4 from being a 3-3. It's like, no, dude, that card should be a 3-6. This card comes out, it's a 4/6. It's like, no, dude, look at this card and then look at Misery. And tell me this card should have any less stats than Misery. Tell me that with a straight face. I don't think you can. And that's not to say that, like, it's the only thing I would want done with Fantomex, but, like, I feel like they are underestimating or overestimating how big of a risk a card like this is. I think it's actually a really safe place to park a bunch of power behind something that is really hard to actually splash into decks. There is not a risk of like a Fantomex package going into a bunch of decks the way Werewolf Merlin does. Simply doesn't exist. It is so much of a bigger ask that it's just not a realistic thing to worry about. There is not a risk of a Warlock package going into a bunch of decks. That is a deck in and of itself. And I feel like they need to push those cards more. And instead, they for some reason, they're just not doing that. Fantomex is I don't want to be like, this is like a fumble, you know? Because I don't know if it's a fumble. And if it is, they can fix it, right? But I think that this is like a genuine misevaluation of like what these cards are in terms of the risk they present. I think they're being too risk averse with these activates that are so face up. There's Cosmic Ghost Rider, there's Deafening Chord. The counterplay to them is so strong, and you have to like. I know Deafening Chord doesn't work on Fantomex, but it does work on Warlock, and that does matter. Like, you have to like actually seriously devote your entire deck to this card, and then sometimes it doesn't even work. I don't know. I think there are a couple things they can do with Fantomex, but like baseline, his base power should be stronger. And I guess my actual pitch for what I would do is I would make it so he would say activate if you have either 1 discarded or 2 destroyed a card, -1 to your opponent's front row. So like that way he like half works if you aren't able to turn him on the full way. Sort of like Wild Child. That kind of mechanic could go a long way on him. I think this card is cool. It generally is interesting. I've enjoyed playing it. It's honestly not as bad as people think it is, which is an argument against doing what I'm saying. But I feel like there's still plenty of room for it to get stronger before it becomes oppressive. And that's really what I'm trying to speak to here is like cards like this in Warlock have tons of room to get stronger. There's so much space to make this card stronger without making it busted to me.
Yeah, this one feels like they really released it like super safe, right? I actually almost even think that you could go, because you mentioned let the effect happen whether it's discarded or destroyed. I actually think you could even keep it at -2 and maybe just drop a power on the Fantomex. Like I would think you could actually keep it at -2 for the effect, which is like whether it's either discarded or destroyed, but keep the afflict at -2. That's what I was thinking. Like
I think
that's
the
even
risk
possible.
for that would be that it would actually become like a splash card in either discard or destroy, where like you don't want that to happen. That's actually where the risk of a card like this would be if you were to do that. So
Wait, what's wrong with a card like this being a splash card and discard or destroy? Because those archetypes kind of need a bit of help, right?
I think you like when you make a card like this, I think you want it to be its own archetype, right? You didn't make a card like this to not have it be its own archetype. You didn't put those restrictions on there to make people just like put this card in the same decks they were already playing, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean currently that's the way it is because it has like double restriction.
Right.
That's for sure.
So I think that if you're gonna ease off on that, you can't put too much power in just one of those things. You know what I mean? I think that would probably be bad, but I don't think anyone would be. I'm not sure anyone would be playing, 4/6 activate -6 to your opponent in like your discard or destroy deck. I don't think people are into that. So I think that's the balance they'd have to strike if they were to make a change to make it work more like Wild Child. But I think it'd be pretty hard to do if it was just like destroy a card -12 your opponent's board. That would be probably bad.
Yeah.
Snowball Showdown is January 10th, and I did my little KMBest tournament, which I enjoyed a lot, but there's a pretty notable difference between the rule set that I used and the rule set that they're using. I required people to play 1 card from the last 3 months, right? I also did my tournament at the end of the season. They're requiring people to play 1 card from January or December. And they're doing their tournament in the first week of January. So really, it's Weapon X season plus the 4 cards we talked about today. That's bad. That's just that's too restrictive. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with doing a tournament with card restrictions in it. I think it's a reasonable thing to do because the goal, presumably based on the conversations I've had, is that they want the metagame to look different. But what I'm worried they have done here is instead of making the metagame look different, what they've done is they've taken Ramp, they've taken Shou-Lao Werewolf, and they've taken Nimrod, and they've said, play one of these decks.
I mean, yeah, honestly, with tournaments, I never really like doing like this kind of limited formats per se. I mean, okay, depends on the game as well. But like, I think for Marvel Snap, limiting based on like cards released in the last few months, you really kind of have to have every single card release give you a playable archetype for that to be kind of nice, right? Because now currently, like you mentioned, right, the Nimrod one maybe still a bit like sus, but like Ramp and werewolf related Shaol stuff, I think will definitely be something that's like the top of like people's choices, which also reduces diversity, you know. So I don't think that's definitely what they wanted to do to keep it fresh. In fact, to me, the format being the fact that like you care about how many cubes you lose is already to me quite a fresh thing. Like whether the cubes count towards your final score line. Personally, I think that's already very interesting because I think that's a different way of playing Marvel Snap than you do normally on the ladder. So to me, that was definitely gonna be good enough when it comes to like generating a new dynamic to the game.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the first Deadpool's Diner. They weren't really sure what a limited time game mode should be. And so they're just like, here are some changes to base Marvel Snap that we want to try. That's sort of what this feels like to me.
Yeah, then Deadpool's Diner was the problem. The problem was it was still too grindy. It was still
too similar to base Marvel Snap. And I think that's what they're going to do here. They're going to have a tournament and they're going to be like, here's all these things that are going to make it different from base Marvel Snap. And what they're actually going to do is sort of empower the things that are good in base Marvel Snap to be even better.
Meta.
Yeah, like it's like
curating their own tier 1 meta or something.
Yeah, like I think that's sort of the risk here that like it's not even like that this is unworkable. It's like specifically a timing thing. Like doing it after the December season, which like if the December season were the Spider season, you'd have way more archetypes that you could play. But the December season has a bunch of these like really specific cards in them, right? Like you look at the December season and it's like, okay, I have Weapon X, which means if I want to play Destroy, I have to play Weapon X and make my Destroy deck a little bit worse. I have Aurora, who is mostly second fiddle to Werewolf Merlin, and Shou-Lao is coming in to make me play Werewolf Merlin instead anyway. I have Fantomex, who we just talked about, fairly medium card. There's just a lot of like very specific archetypes that play cards from December. And then there's like 2 that really stand out. And Chamber is one of them. And then you have whatever card you want to say is the Nimrod card, right? Like Deafening Chord, not Deafening Chord, Fastball Special, Adamantium Infusion. Those are the ones that stand out in terms of cards that, like, they made a bunch of specific cards, right? What other decks are playing Fastball Special? Jet, Phoenix Force? Like, yeah, sure, go play that.
One guy will bring that to the tournament.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I think it's specifically a timing issue and not like there is a fundamental problem with doing this issue, because I just ran a tournament with basically the same rule set, right? It's not that bad. It was basically fine, but the timing of it being December and early January, that I think is the thing they're running into. I want to talk a little bit about Nimrod. Just like a pretty good deck. I think people are a little bit low on for, I guess, probably like baseline feel reasons. But I kind of feel like Nimrod might be the best combo deck in the game right now. Like it's predictable and garbagey, but I can't really think of a combo deck I prefer playing to Nimrod. So I guess largely what I'm trying to get at here is I think there's an unfilled space in the metagame where everyone is focusing on like, all right, we're going to play Madam Web Thing First Steps midrange. All right, we're going to play Shou-Lao Shadow King midrange. All right, we're going to midrange it up, midrange it up. I'm like pretty sure you can just Nimrod those decks a lot of the time. It's not free. They have reasonable interaction, especially the Madam Web deck with the movable Cosmo, the Juggernaut, all that stuff. They got stuff for you. but I think it's a little closer to free than people are giving it credit for. Like that deck can just beat people. I had a lot of like when I was playing it recently, it was just like snap on turn 2, they retreat on 5. Like there's just a lot of that in that deck, and that's I think that's an indicator of people just being like, oh, I'm not prepared for this. That deck got some legit good cards. Fastball Special and Adamantium Infusion are legit upgrades to how that deck functions.
Yeah, so I got two things to talk about when it comes to this particular deck. I mean, Nimrod has been around for a while, right, in different shapes and forms. So the thing about Nimrod as a deck is that it's still the same thing in the sense that when you assemble like your Exodia, your combo pieces, right, you just win. It's just too much power. And then the second thing is, I feel like this deck, you if you want to play this deck on ladder and like get to like a nice rank or whatever, you just need to follow like one very basic rule, right? Which is if you don't have the stuff, just leave -1 cube. If you have the stuff, snap early. And people don't like to retreat. I've talked about this for a very long time already. So like you get to if you're constantly just going -1 +2, -1 +2 with this decks, and then occasionally go +8 because some guy will just stay all the way. This deck actually can be used to climb because the moment you hit your stuff, you just win, right? And then if you don't hit, you just leave early and just go next. So it's a boring way of looking at Marvel Snap per se, but I guess it's a way you can like consistently grind and climb with this style of like, if I draw these, I win deck, you know? So that's why I think about Nimrod and why I think it's actually possible right now. Because the decks that really beat it, they don't really beat the output. They beat the fact that your deck is more inconsistent than their Nimrod deck, right? So I do think that this deck is actually potentially something you could like consider climbing with on ladder if you're like a bit more of a disciplined, grindy individual when it comes to like wanting to get like your MMR.
I am going to phrase this as a sort of debate topic here. Do you think Shadow King should be nerfed? Do you think, in the context not just of is this too strong, but do you think he's doing good things for the metagame or bad things for the metagame?
So my stance on this, okay, so I didn't really give this much thought other than what I've already been thinking about for like months, which is my stance on Shadow King is that firstly, when you print, this is gonna sound very repetitive, but when you print new cards that are powerful, you kind of have to lean into green power, right? So when you lean into green power, it means you're vulnerable to Shadow King. So every new good exciting card will sort of most likely lean into green power, which then kind of loses a bit more to Shadow King. So my take is Shadow King does too much. So I really do want to see Shadow King get a nerf. I'm not like sure what this nerf should be yet, but like the fact that every new card you print that could be good and exciting just gets farmed by Shadow King like 99% of the time makes me feel like Shadow King is really doing too much now and will be doing too much in the future in its current state. So I mean, it's keeping the meta under control to a certain extent right now, but like, what if we just like loosen up the restrictions of control, just make the Shadow King a bit of a worse card, and then see how the meta evolves right now? I'm pretty sure we'll still have like certain amounts of like games which are won with nerfed Shadow King or whatsoever, but like, I think we can loosen it up a bit, just nerf the King, and then like see if it's too out of control. Because honestly, if it's not, then it's great, right? Because then you can print new cards that lean into green power, because that's kind of an easy and good way to get cards that are new to be exciting, right? And I don't exactly straight up lose to Shadow King. Yeah, that's my take.
I think that my first instinct when I talk about Shadow King is I think it's holding back a lot of really powerful stuff that is probably good that it's being held back. That's my first instinct, is like I think it does good things for the metagame. My second instinct is, didn't I say that about Shang-Chi and wasn't I wrong? You know? Like I'm like I think it's doing good things for the metagame, but I'm willing to admit that there's possibly a blind spot here for me on this. Because I thought that about Shang-Chi. They got rid of Shang-Chi and everything got better. And it's like, oh, I guess you could just do that. So I'm not saying those situations are exactly analogous. What I am saying is like, I've noticed that I was wrong in a similar situation before. And so I'm paying more attention to this one to see what I can learn from the previous one. I think that largely leans me towards, I think it would be fine for them to cut a power off the guy. Like, that's sort of where my head is at, where it's like, if you want to make him a 3-3, chill, go for it. I think the larger
How about
thing
make him
though,
cost 4? Make him cost 4.
that I don't like, right? Like that
Why?
really worries me because I'm not sure he can do his job if he costs 4. I mean, I guess it depends on
he
like what
can't.
other stats you put on him, but I think it's
Yeah.
way harder for him to do his job if he's a 4. And I do
Isn't that the
want
point?
something doing that job. I just don't want it
Because
to be
you
free.
pair him with less stuff, but he
Mhm.
still removes all the green power. I think being able to pair your tech card with less stuff to me was always the way to nerf tech cards. A lot of the time, but maybe this is too heavy of a nerf, But I do think a viable nerf to tech cards is always in Marvel Snap at least. It's always to be able to pair it with less stuff in like one given turn. That's what I think.
I agree. Like that's true.
But you think it's too harsh? Is that what you're trying to say?
It might be a little too. It might be harsh enough that he might not be able to do his job. Would be my worry. Where it's like maybe you 4/6 that card. Like you look at what they did with Cosmo during the tech apocalypse, and it's like maybe that's a direction you can do.
Yeah.
I'd be worried about that though. Largely, I would want to chop some power off of his base so that he's just a lot more about his effects. A, because I think that's better flavor for the character Shadow King is. And B, because I do think he performs a valuable function in the metagame. He just needs to be doing it less freely. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for watching the first 8 cubes of 2026. I have been KMBest. He has been Lamby Series. We're both very grateful for you watching this, and he's about to take us out.
All right, guys. For the first time in 2026, like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.